like to welcome our first speaker, Zen Honeycutt. She is a food activist, author, farmer, speaker, and founder of a national grassroots movement focused on food safety, toxins, and consumer awareness. Welcome. Hi everybody, welcome Meatstock, Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Woo! All right. What a beautiful crowd. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you so much for coming out today. There's a million places you could be besides here just on YouTube, and you're taking your time to learn about your health and improving everything in your community, and I'm just so thrilled to be here. So today, I am going to talk about the truth about our food supply and what you can do, and also answer the question, why does a carnivore diet work for so many? Now, to be clear, I am not a doctor or a nutritionist or a scientist. I am one of those unstoppable moms who is working to improve the health of my family, our community, our nation, and the world. And I happen to have access to doctors, scientists, lawyers, researchers. For the past 14 years, God has blessed me with the opportunity to gather information and communicate it in a way that makes sense for people. And my dedication today is that you leave here knowing so much about what's going on in the food supply that you become my partner in health and you go out there and create healthy communities. Are you guys interested in that? Yeah. Awesome. You're gonna know more than most doctors and scientists on the planet after you get out of here. That's what I promise. And everything is backed by science on our website, so you don't have to memorize it all. I will leave it up long enough, I believe, so that you can take a picture if you want to. And if you really want something afterwards, you can just email me at zen@momsacrossamerica.org, okay? So you'll have access to all this information. You don't have to be overwhelmed right now. But before I get started, I just want to announce really big win, okay? So I don't know if you heard, but there's a farm bill that was trying to be passed this week, just yesterday. We got the pesticide immunity clause out of it. Yes. And 73 Republicans crossed party lines to say that our health is more important than the wealth of the pesticide companies. So this is huge. It is huge. So we're going to talk about why this is so important today, and we're going to start with a little bit of background. Moms Across America started over 14 years ago. I'm a 20-year health advocate, 24-year allergy kids mom. I wrote my book, Unstoppable. You can find it on Amazon. We have had, at Moms Across America, we started marching in 4th of July parades, and we've had over 600 leaders create over 1,000 events in all 50 states all across the country. And we've initiated the first glyphosate testing in America. I'm going to talk a lot about that. How many people know about glyphosate? I just want to see show of hands. Okay, I don't have to explain it too much, but awesome, you guys are incredible. Okay, we've successfully petitioned Costco to get glyphosate out of their, glyphosate-based Roundup out of their stores. They now sell another version, which is more toxic, so we don't want to use that. We've been featured in 14 international films, and we have increased the sales of organic from 20 billion to 70 billion today in the past 14 years. And here's a picture of us in the parade. Some of you might have joined in your 4th of July parades 13 years ago, where we reached thousands locally and millions nationally in a single day. It was so fun. Now, what I'm going to tell you about the truth about what's going on in the food supply is that there's 3 kinds of GMOs. How many people know this? 3 kinds of GMOs. Some. Okay, I'm going to explain. So the first one is Bt toxins. That stands for bacteriotherogenesis. That is the name of a bacteria in the carcass of a dead grain caterpillar, and they genetically engineer it to constantly reproduce more toxins. So it becomes like a little toxin factory, and when a rootworm comes along and eats the any part of the corn, like the root or the stalk or the corn itself, the little toxin gets in its stomach, reproduces more toxins, explodes the stomach, and kills the bug. It is corn with the pesticide built right in, which is easier for the farmers because they don't have to spend money on pesticides to spray in the corn, right? They don't have to spend money on that. But it's built right in, and we eat it. And guess what happens? Anybody hear about gut dysbiosis? Anybody have kids here or adults with allergies? How many people have allergies? Yeah, you probably have gut dysbiosis, which is holes in your small intestines where the food comes out, and then the body detects it as a foreign invader, and now you have an allergy, right? So that's what GMO corn has been doing for the past 30 years in our bodies. This is why food is different today than it was when some of you were kids. This did not exist. This type of GMO came into the food supply in the late 1990s. So that is Bt toxin GMOs. Now, Bt toxin is used in organic food, but it's not genetically engineered to reproduce more toxins. It just dies within 4 hours and you're fine, okay? But the genetically engineered one, major problem, causes holes in the stomach of whatever eats it. Now, the herbicide-tolerant GMOs are primarily Roundup Ready. That's glyphosate-based herbicides. 80% of GMOs are Roundup Ready. They're herbicide-tolerant, okay? That's a huge portion when you think about the fact that 85 to 95 to 100% of our corn, soy, and sugar beets are genetically modified in our food supply right now. They have taken over the American food supply. So a huge portion of them are genetically engineered to withstand Roundup, and that's why we spray 280 million pounds of Roundup on our food supply every year in America. And the next type of GMO we call DT GMOs, which stands for desired trait. This is CRISPR, gene drive, those type of GMOs, which is like salmon that is genetically engineered to grow 4 times fatter, 4 times faster, and be sterile. Does that sound delicious?
No.
Not to me. I'm not interested in this. And good thing, a lot of other people weren't either. After 17 years, we killed that. That's gone away. Aquabani, no GMO salmon. Okay, and then potatoes though, and apples still around. They're genetically engineered to not brown, which means they're still rotting. You just can't see it. You can smell them rotting, but you can't see it rotting. And those potatoes could be in your French fries at the restaurant, called Simplot GMO potatoes. Now the problem with these desired trait ones, even though it sounds good, you know, like more vitamin A or a pink pineapple, you know, something cute, they cause off-target mutations because they've changed it. They've messed with what God invented perfectly naturally as it is, and the organism tries to protect itself. It's like it builds a scar, do you know what I mean? It changes. And so those off-target mutations are happening in the food. I've got enough to worry about with my kids, with social media and sports and being sick. I don't want to have to worry about off-target mutations. So none of these GMOs are recommended by me or my organization. Problem is they're not labeled. The number one pesticide that we worry about is technically an herbicide, what we can call it a pesticide, is glyphosate. Glyphosate is sprayed on crops as a pre-harvest weed killer. So it's sprayed on the crops as a weed killer that are genetically modified for it, right? They can fly over the corn or the soy or the sugar beets, spray the GMO crops with glyphosate. The weeds will die, the crop will not. But it's also sprayed on wheat and peas and beans and legumes that are not organic as a drying agent. So it dries out the whole crop before it's harvested. The crop dries out, and then the farmers can harvest it more quickly. So it's been found in thousands of foods, even contaminating organic brands, about 20% in small amounts. And we've been finding it on 93% of school lunches and 100% of fast food. And I'm going to dive into the test results. Next, well, actually not next. First, I'm going to give you this long list. I'm not going to read through all this. This is just a visual so that you can see the harm of glyphosate. It is not acutely toxic like some of the other ingredients in Roundup, those that are 1,000 times more toxic. It's long-term harmful, right? It causes cancer over time. It causes endocrine disruption over time. It causes nervous system damage, neurological damage. It damages sperm in 4 different ways. We don't need that happening. It androgenizes baby girls and makes their genital areas more masculine. And it causes liver disease and kidney disease at levels well below what the EPA allows in our food supply. Glyphosate has been linked to over 40 different Western medical diseases. And when you understand how it works as a chelator, as an antibiotic, as an endocrine disruptor, then you understand why it's linked to so many different diseases. And I'll explain the chelator part, but throughout this, I'll explain all of this. So we did some testing because we found out that 80% of GMOs are engineered to withstand glyphosate, right? We wanted to get rid of GMOs, to be honest with you. First of all, I didn't understand how harmful glyphosate was. And I thought, well, if we go after glyphosate, a pesticide, because everybody understands that pesticide is harmful. They don't really so much understand GMOs. But if we go after a pesticide and get rid of that, then we get rid of 80% of GMOs. That was my original goal. And then I found out nobody was testing for glyphosate. So I bugged a farmer friend of mine, and he finally found a lab owner that would test for glyphosate. And the reason why he did that was because he used to work at Monsanto. He developed the methodology to test for glyphosate with Monsanto. He knew about Monsanto's skeletons in their closet, and he chose to be on our side. And he chose to test water and urine and breast milk for glyphosate, and this is what we found. We found 3 times higher the levels of glyphosate that is allowed in water, and we found it in, between 70 and 90% of the tap water that we tested. This was just people who sent in their own tap water, urine, or breast milk. We found it, the highest level was in a female college student with cancer, and that 8.7 over there is my son, who had the level of a farmer. He was not a farmer. He was not exposed to glyphosate anywhere except for in the wheat that he was eating, the burger buns and the bread. And my middle son was the one that had that level. My other 2 sons did not, because at the time they were gluten intolerant. They weren't eating wheat. So that son had autism symptoms at that time. And I learned that glyphosate destroys, as an antimicrobial, one way that it functions, destroys the beneficial gut bacteria and allows for the proliferation of the pathogenic gut bacteria. That pathogenic gut bacteria then tells the vagus nerve in the gut to go on attack. Bad guys, attack. So the microglia cells in the brain go on attack, and they create an excitotoxin, which excites the brain neurons, and then eventually, because when we get too excited, eventually we tire out and it dies. So now you've got brain neurons that aren't connecting, and you've got kids who can't make eye contact. You've got kids that won't stop spinning or stimming or walking on you've got kids with autism symptoms. So the bad gut bacteria from glyphosate exposure is contributing to autism symptoms, and there are rat studies that say the same exact thing. Okay, so we got the glyphosate out of his diet, and at that time, he had 8.7 and he had the autism symptoms. We also got sugar out of his diet because sugar feeds the bad gut bacteria. So you really want to look at these vendors that have sugar alternatives, okay? The sugar feeds the bad gut bacteria. Got that out of his diet. It was about 6 weeks, and we retested him. His glyphosate levels were no longer detectable. 6 weeks, eating organic, and no sugar. And his autism symptoms were gone. 6 weeks. So we've got to do this, folks. And we've tested glyphosate in breast milk, and we found levels 3,000 times higher than is shown to cause sex hormone changes and liver and kidney damage. It is so important to eat organic when you're a breastfeeding mother, no matter what it is that you're eating. And because the impact can be, we know the impact on shrimp is that first of all, it stays persistent in dark salty water for 315 days. Our womb contains dark salty water. Glyphosate kills white shrimp at levels above 5.2 parts per million. 25 parts per million is allowed on sugar. And we know pregnant women love to eat some sugar now and then, and that's okay. But it's not okay if it's not organic, because it's allowed on there and it kills the shrimp. What is it going to do to the fetuses? We have an infertility rate now that is off the charts. I know we don't get too political here, but the Democrats were very insistent that, we have access to abortion in 2023. There were 1.2 million women who had abortions in 2023 and made a big deal of this in the last elections. But abortion is a moot issue if you cannot get pregnant. And that same year, there were 6.2 million women who could not get pregnant. Fertility is a much bigger issue than abortion right now, and we have to pay attention to this crisis that we have. This was also mimicked in testing. This pig farmer, Ib Peterson, personal friend of mine, met him in China when I spoke at the food safety conference there back in 2015 after we found glyphosate in breast milk. And he had 30,000 pigs that he did a repeated test, fed them grains not sprayed with glyphosate. They weren't even GMO grains. They were just grains that had, drying agent, right? Sprayed on the grains. Not sprayed with glyphosate, and grains that were sprayed with glyphosate. He had a 33% drop in fertility with the pigs that were spayed grains with glyphosate. And when they took them off of it, 33% back up again, okay? So we have plenty of data to show the glyphosate connection to reproductive issues. And that's how it's an endocrine disruptor, that's what it does. So the foods that this is just a short list of some of the foods that we've tested and other groups have tested that are positive for glyphosate at concerning level. And not just foods, also breast milk, sperm, tampons, sanitary pads, wound gauze that's used in hospitals, urine, and even vaccines. Why is it getting in vaccines? Well, because pig tendons are ground up and made into gelatin, and 25% of a live virus vaccine is gelatin as a stabilizing agent. And those pigs are eating GMO grains sprayed with glyphosate. Glyphosate, unfortunately, does not wash, dry, or cook off. It absorbs right into the crop, it absorbs right into people and their tendons and animals, and it ends up in vaccines. If you see here, there's chick embryo cell culture. Those chickens also eating glyphosate sprayed with grain sprayed with glyphosate. There's bovine serum, those cows eating grain sprayed with glyphosate, and other ingredients as well in here. So school lunches, 93% of them positive for glyphosate, 74% contained one of at least 29 harmful pesticides. There were high levels of veterinary drugs and hormones. I'm sorry about the typo thing here. We added in that one of the veterinary drugs and hormones we found was an aviary contraceptive called narcarbazine. And it is in there because it's an anti-parasitic for a very common chicken disease called cocciditis, but they can only give it to the meat birds because it prevents the egg-laying birds from laying eggs, right? So they only give it to the meat birds. So it is an aviary contraceptive, and this is why I do not eat chicken unless I know it's organic and pasture-raised, because it also, the antibiotics in chicken can contribute to very high levels of bacteria that causes UTIs. There's a lot of UTIs right now that are super antibiotic resistant. It's because of the CAFO-fed chickens and the grains that they're eating. The grains for chickens also have, another side note, very high levels of arsenic. We have a mom whose husband is a truck driver. He had to get a hazmat license just to transport chicken feed because of the high levels of arsenic on the chicken feed. So you really want to make sure your meat source is very clean, okay? They also, 100% of the school lunch samples contain heavy metals, which can come from the manure of the animals that are fed from CAFO farms. So, abysmally low in nutrients as well. Fast food, just, real quick, some of the main points, 40 to 60% of the top 10 fast food companies contain antibiotics that were not approved for human use, including that aviary contraceptive. And there's also butanediol, which is a central nervous system depressant, was found in 47% of the top 10 samples. It causes aggression and combativeness. So again, you want to make sure your meat source is as clean as possible. Also heavy metals, pesticides. Panera Bread had the highest levels of glyphosate, unfortunately. And it was In-N-Out Burger French fries that had the highest level of cadmium, and Sonic Burger had high levels of lead. Domino's Pizza, the vegetable pizza had way higher levels of pesticides. And that makes sense when you think about vegetables, right? You're getting a double dose of pesticides if you have vegetables on your pizza. And the lack of minerals is an issue. B12, right, and the B vitamins are essential for the prefrontal cortex development of the brain. That's where you say, I won't punch somebody, even if they're making me mad, right? That's what you need your vitamin Bs for that prefrontal cortex to function in that way. And the book Food and Behavior, A Natural Connection by Barbara Reed Stibb is the #1 book I recommend, especially if you have family members with behavior issues. It is she says in there that the one thing that criminals, parolees, and serial killers had in common was they bragged that they lived on junk food. Okay, it was not that they were a certain race in a city, white or black, rich or poor. They bragged that they lived on junk food, and with supplementation, however, the violent acts dropped 50 to 70% in 1 to 2 weeks. And the recidivism rate switched when they had whole healthy foods. When they got away from the junk foods, instead of 70% coming back in within a year, 70% went out and stayed out. Okay, so we know, and the level of vitamin B3 in the Chick-fil-A sandwiches, if you wanted to get your recommended level day for one day, would be 380 sandwiches in one day, gentlemen, and 333 if you were a female. So the cheap food is not really that cheap when you think about the nutrients that you're getting, which is why you eat, is for nutrients, not just for taste. So baby formula, also 100% of the samples contain aluminum and lead. 80% of the samples had lead levels higher than what the EPA allows. And all kinds of, the Bub's goat's milk baby formula had 41,000 parts per billion. We don't know, but we think that's from the geoengineering. They are spraying aluminum in the skies. Not so much here in Tennessee, though, right? You guys got it passed to stop? Yeah, mostly. I'm gonna need an update on that, but you worked on it anyway. I know some people worked on that. So there's geoengineering. They spray aluminum in the skies to cloud seed to cause rain, right? That's aluminum, and we're finding extremely high levels of aluminum. So we need to keep an eye on that and make sure that stops. Another group tested for baby food, high levels of heavy metals as well, mostly lead and arsenic. Rice formula has high levels of arsenic. Gluten-free food, unfortunately, 44 out of 46 of the samples that we tested were positive for glyphosate, which is exactly the reason why we're going to gluten-free food, because the glyphosate has caused gut dysbiosis and contributed to celiac disease. So this really made me mad because I was looking for clean sources of gluten-free food, and we had a very hard time finding it. There were only two brands that were gluten-free, that were totally clear of glyphosate. And you can find all this information on our website. And Girl Scout cookies. I know, I'm so sorry. We tested Girl Scout cookies, and they were so toxic. It's just terrible. And 100% of the samples were positive for glyphosate. 100% were positive for toxic metals. 22 out of 25 were positive for all 5 toxic metals. We had never found that before. My favorites, the peanut butter patties, and also the mint ones, the thin mints, because they allow very high levels of glyphosate on mint. It's like 100 parts per million. They spray it as a drying agent. So no mint tea unless it's organic, okay, or other mint products. Very high levels of glyphosate. So sorry about that. Military food, also most recent testing, 16 mess hall meals and 24 MREs, 100% were positive for pesticides. And guess what? 100% of those pesticides are made in China, an adversarial country. We are paying them $15 to $20 billion a year to poison Americans. And we found 62 of those pesticides in military food. The other samples, we found 27 or 29 pesticides. We found more, almost double the amount of pesticides in our military food. I'm mad about this. This should not be happening. Our military should be getting the best food. They should be having Wagyu beef, right? Massaged with the high-end contractors. Then we pay these contractors for weapons and jet planes billions of dollars. The top high military grade should mean something for our military, for their food. They should have American grass-fed regenerative meat. Our military should be getting American meat. They're not. They're getting meat from China and Africa and other places, and it's loaded with veterinary drugs and hormones. They should be getting American-grown organic food for our military. And did you know, according to our AI calculations, that if Trump designated just 2% of our military budget to go towards training farmers to go switch to regenerative organic and supplying our military and our schools with regenerative organic food grown here in America, we could feed all of them for less than 2% of the military budget. I think that's something that we could do. And Trump loves the military. It's something he could do. So this is very important. We also found all, the very things in there too. So I already talked about the book Food and Behavior, Natural Connection, and the prison system, okay? But I want to bring up also this hamster in a wheat field. This was the control group of hamsters in a cornfield in Germany. And this corn farmer saw a massive decline of hamsters. And he asked the scientists to come study it, and they did, because they do that in Germany. They actually do some real science. And what they found was that these hamster population was declining because the mothers were cannibalistic. They were eating their young on the first day of life. And these cannibalistic mother hamsters, which sounds like a comic book, but it's not, were actually completely devoid of one vitamin, vitamin B3. Remember I talked about the deficiency of vitamin B3 earlier in violence? And when they administered the vitamin B3, guess what happened? The cannibalism completely stopped. One vitamin. So do we need actually more gun laws that criminals are not going to follow anyway? Or do we need some vitamins and minerals in our food? Do we need some real food? That's what we need. And this little boy up here is a picture just to remind me that there was a mother who called me from Santa Ana, California, low income, 4 kids, Hispanic mom, called me and said, Zen, you have to keep doing what you're doing, and here's why. When her son was 8 years old, he had behavioral issues. He was aggressive, and the school didn't believe her until one day they called her and said, you've got to take your son out of school. He just threatened to blow the whole school with a bomb and kill everyone in it. And she said, well, I told you, he's got mental health issues. And they said, okay, we'll send him to a psychiatrist. So they sent him to a psychiatrist, and guess what the psychiatrist did? SSRI drug, right? Yes, you're right. And then she said, well, is there anything else we can do? He said, well, have you looked at the food you're feeding him? She said, what do you mean? He said, what are you feeding him? She said, hot dogs, pizza, burgers, quesadillas, tacos, right? All of that, standard American diet. He said, have you thought about the preservatives, the dyes, the GMOs, the pesticides, the chemicals? She said, no. He said, you can either feed him organic, or you can give him this drug for the rest of his life. So, on a single mom income, she fed her boy rice and beans, and she fed him organic. And within 2 weeks, the school principal called her and said, we don't know what you're doing, but this is a completely new human being. Keep doing what you're doing. And I told her, you know what you did? You gave your son a new future. That was not the future he was going to have. In fact, you gave everybody in that school a new future because they're not mourning the loss of, 23 kids that had just been shot by a gun or blown up by a bomb. This was the day after she called me the day after the Florida shooting. Do you remember that one? And she admitted to me, my son would have been one of those kids that would have gotten a gun and shot up the kids at the school. And I said, well, that's not happening now. And you may have even changed the future of the entire country, because who knows what these kids that are now going to live are going to be able to create and invent, and the relationships they have, and the love that they will give to this world, and the potential that they will fulfill. So this is why we do what we do at Moms Across America, because we want every child and every human being to be able to live up to their fullest potential. So that's what you do when you put time and energy and effort. It's not easy. But when you put the effort into eating the cleanest food you possibly can, you are changing your future. You are creating a new future for you and your family. All right, we're going to move on. I know I don't have that much time left. So, pretty clear, this toxic burden is off the charts. We have a massive health problem. New stat I have to update, 1 out of 2 people in America are now expected to get cancer. If it keeps going this way, by 2050, it's going to be everybody. So we've got to change things up with our exposure to toxic chemicals, okay? And you can see this list. It's huge. 1 out of 24 to 36 kids with children on the autism spectrum. It's been supposed to be 1 out of 2 by the year 2032. That's around the corner. Learning disorders, mental illness, chronic illness. It's crazy, insane. It's $8 trillion per year if you include the mental health aspect and the violence aspect. It's a problem, okay? I don't have to go through all of this. Major problem is what what affected my family, my son, Ben Honeycutt. He was the one that had me start Moms Across America when he was 9 years old, when we were fighting the GMO labeling initiative, and we were in the parking lot afterwards. We lost. That who doesn't want GMOs labeled? Somehow we lost. I think the election was rigged. And we were in the car afterwards, and I was crying, and he said, well, you know, Mom, even Star Wars took 6 episodes. Oh. Yeah, and they had Yoda. And so I decided, what if it was time to take on a new episode? What if I just said that I'm the one to transform the food supply? Not like for ego reasons, and not be by myself. I just mean I'm not going to wait for someone else to do this, right? And so I did, and I took on creating Moms Across America and marching in 4th of July parades to raise awareness. And we're doing it. We are transforming the food supply. The military food is changing over to 20 different bases, to real food. The prison food's being switched over. The school lunches are being improved. They're going to be able to add eggs into the breakfasts now. Things are happening right now in ways that had never happened before. And my son Ben and his life-threatening allergies was the reason why I started this. And he decided when he almost died from pecans in the Thanksgiving stuffing at 5 years old, he got very aware of what was going on, and he promised me, and we became partners to increase his health when he was about 9 years old. And then when he was 14, he watched the movie Soup Chub, and he decided to be a vegan. Oh. And then he read the book How Not to Die by Michael Greger, and decided to no longer eat animal products. And so for 7 years, he did not eat any animal products. And for 10 years, he ate completely organic. And I noticed that he began to get depressed. And I had him get tested. And he had high levels of heavy metals. And we found some of this out before he decided to end his life 8.5 months ago at 22 years old. We found out some of this information before, and I gave him detox supplements, and he did not take them. He didn't believe that they would help. And we found out some of this information just before he killed himself, and then we found out some of the information after, because I insisted on having his body tested, and people donated very generously for me to have his body tested. And what we found was high levels of thallium, which is in kale, and he ate a gigantic salad every single day, mostly with kale in it. Thallium causes DNA breakage. It causes mental illness. We found high levels of mycotoxins, which are in grains and beans, and that's caused by glyphosate. I'll show you a slide in a second. Glyphosate increases the presence of mold in grains like corn and peas and beans and wheat. And they're not testing for these heavy metals or these mycotoxins in vegetables or in grains at all. And we found high levels of DDT, which is a banned pesticide, and we think that's coming from the grains from Mexico because they don't ban DDT in Mexico. So you're starting to see why some people might feel better if they avoid vegetables and grains. Can you see that? The heavy metals and the mycotoxins that this government is not regulating for. And Ben has taught me to send this message to all of you and to the people in the world that we need to transform this food system for the sake of everyone being able to live up to their fullest potential. The other thing he had was very low cholesterol because he did not consume animal products. So I am mad because the vegan community is telling people to eat vegan, and they're not telling them about the risk of low levels of cholesterol. I believe the book How Not to Die had a hand in my son dying. This is my reality, right? In addition, oh, did I just go backward and forward? I don't know what I did here, sorry. I guess I have a lot to get through. I'm gonna have to go faster. Oh, sorry, I just went through everything. Can you guys put it back up for me? I went the wrong way. Okay, so anyway, so the testing, can we go back or put it back up? Yeah, okay. And I have 5 minutes. Okay, so this is the new my new reality that needs to get out there is that if you are going to eat any kind of way, you need to find out also genetically if you are disposed to do that. My son Ben had a mutated MTHFR gene, thank you, which.
Wait.
The other way?
Other way.
Okay. My son Ben had the mutated, no, this is the end. It's going towards the end. It's the other way, okay. I did it again. I'm so sorry, I did it again. It's the wrong way. Okay, this way. Now I'm going to go forward. Okay, I'm going to go forward real quick. Okay. So, my son Ben had the mutated MTHFR gene. Do you get, how many people know about that? Yeah. Okay, and other gene variants that showed that he had the inability to detox, okay? And so those toxins in his body were harmful to him in ways that might not be as harmful to other people. Also, he did not absorb choline well through plants. So he should never have been a vegan. I have the same thing. I have to eat eggs in order to get choline. That's what helps your brain work. So, so that is essential. Now, could the vegan diet be contributing to depression due to contamination of agrochemicals? Absolutely. Look at all the sources of where wheat is. Wherever you see wheat, there's glyphosate. Wherever you see peas or beans, protein powders, any protein powder with peas or beans, even if it's organic, it can have glyphosate in it because of contamination. So this is why a lot of people feel crappy on any kind of diet that contains grains. It's because glyphosate is being sprayed on it. So this is the nutrient uptake also. Very low nutrients. Glyphosate exposure reduces the nutrient uptake into crops like corn and soy and all of that by 80 to 95% because it's a chelator. It grabs onto and makes unavailable the vital nutrients of any living thing it touches. So we are eating junk food in America if there's any glyphosate being used at all, because that's just with drift level exposure. So this is why we have such a nutrient deficiency problem. This is an example that shows the mold growth, increase of mold growth 15 times with glyphosate exposure, low level exposure of glyphosate. That means mycotoxins. This means ochratoxins, aflatoxins, xenolone. Get your kid tested for mycotoxins, heavy metals, and pesticides. And if you go to Moms Across America under resources, hover over that, drop down, and it says get tested. You can get your child tested for that and have a nutritionist support your child. We just had somebody do this after I talked about my son Ben on the high wire, and her son was 10 years old, he was depressed, and within 3 months, completely better. Because she got the testing, she found out what was going on in his body. We're testing the food, we can't test everybody's food you're eating, only you know, and only you know what's in your body if you get tested. So that's my number one recommendation, is spend the money to get the testing done for your kid or your body and your genetics and your toxin load, and then make the changes that you need to make. So this is why the carnivore diet works for so many, because you're avoiding grains and you're getting almost no glyphosate and 2,4-D, dicamba, and 1,100 other pesticides are not as prevalent at all. Very, very low levels in meat. This is, I believe, the major reason why. So other drugs to be aware of, the other things to be aware of is that there's veterinary drugs and hormones and CAFO meat. This is an extreme example, with that cow, but there is potentially high levels of lead in some meat. So this is why you want to make sure it's pasture raised, organic as much as possible. There's much less likely chance of that happening because they're growing their own fertility. They're not bringing in fertilizer from some other CAFO farm with high levels of lead, which is in the petroleum that's in the pesticides, right? So those animals are eating grains sprayed with the pesticides, and that pesticides contribute. So here is the heavy levels of heavy metals in these different products. So you want to make sure, we know the USDA and the FDA are not doing their job. They've got to do their job. And here's what you could do. Get tested. That's a total transparency toxin testing page on our website. Eat organic as much as possible. You may need to start with grains or stop eating grains. You may want to try that altogether. And then reduce or eliminate processed sugar, eat fermented food, support gut integrity. We have some suggestions here, and make sure you get tested for those gene variants. Also, the supplements, trace supplements and vitamins. Everybody should be supplementing because your food is deficient of nutrients. Everybody, okay? Trace minerals and vitamins, very clean sources. Detox, 20 minutes in a sauna. I know you have a sauna guy here. Love it. 20 minutes in a sauna equals a month of detox supplements. So get in the sauna, okay, a couple times a week at least. Retest, trust and verify. Sleep, please prioritize your self-care. Put your phone away. Do not have your phone by your bed. Get some sleep and be in nature 20 minutes in the sun, minimum. 20 minutes a day. And some of you think about you're not doing this. You're just walking to and from a car. Right. Make sure you get out 20 minutes of sun, an hour or two by ocean or forest. Increases your red blood cell count by 50%. You are healing yourself by being outside in nature. Meditate or pray, and this is proven to be healthy. Yes, time up, okay. Okay, and go to our petition page, be a part of the Yes Man team, and if we don't buy it, they can't sell it, right? That's how we transform the food system, supporting regenerative organic. Watch the movie Common Ground. It's on Amazon. It's a great movie, not just because I'm in it. It's a really great movie. And this is the summary. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Appreciate it.